Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. I hope everyone is having a wonderful, wonderful evening. Guys, welcome back into another edition of Long Winded Donnie Review. Yes, Long Winded Donnie Review, where I take the pain so you don't have to deal with it. Yes, we know that our Commander in Chief, Donald Timothy Trump, loves to hear himself speak. Yes, he absolutely does. And so he does a lot of speeches, he does a lot of interviews, and we know for a fact that when he does these speeches and interviews, he's very long-winded. So what I do is actually consume these speeches, consume these interviews so you don't have to do it. What up, Tech Memphis? Guys, listen, I am live right now I'm live on Twitch, live on YouTube. This is a Twitch and YouTube exclusive, and also you can always watch it back on my YouTube. So first and foremost, if you're not following me, make sure that you give me a follow. Just an FYI, hey, it looks like Tech Memphis just actually subbed. That's what I was just about to say. We have subscribers now on the Twitch side, so if you are not a subscriber, please go ahead and consider subscribing. Also, guys, just an FYI, quick plug before I get started. Follow me on all the socials. You should see it at the bottom of my screen. I am on Blue Sky. Follow me on Blue Sky, Twitch, on YouTube, and Instagram. Yeah, all of my socials are listed. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and get into it. I try to keep this as brief as possible. I know I used to say 15 minutes, but sometimes 15 minutes doesn't cut it. So we're actually looking at Donald Trump's House Republican Conference speech from yesterday for me, but it's January the 27th, 2025. The speech was 1 hour and 7 minutes. 1 hour and 7 minutes. And I know you look at the actual screen and you say, oh, it's not that many topics. Let me tell you, I'm going to be completely honest. This was one of the hardest Trump speeches I have ever watched. It was not good. It was not good. It was a difficult watch. He was all over the place. It was hard to actually keep up with. But I'm gonna go through this to make sure you guys know what he talked about. So first and foremost, we start off with "It has begun." He actually just gave an introduction and said hey to a bunch of people. He talked to he said hey to Mike Johnson. He said hey to Steve Scalise. He shouted out other Republican leaders that were there. He actually he gave a shout out to Kelly Strickland, and then he called out Kellyanne Conway. He then continued to talk about how, apparently he has a boulevard now named after him. And he started he made a statement saying, that's the start. So again, the best thing that you can do is flatter him by, doing something like that. But yeah, he was super excited about that. He then went on to call out, quote unquote, the fake news. He talked about the popular vote. Of course, we know he loves to talk about his vote. He can't get anything started without talking about the vote. So he talked about the popular vote. He talked about the swing states, and which, of course, he continued to lie, right? He said that his swing state victory was massive across all the swing states. Listen, you guys know here on Long-Winded Donnie Reviews, I bring receipts, but I don't really think there's a need to actually fact check these. I fact checked these lies multiple times, but he said that he won all the swing states with a massive victory. That's a lie. He said that he shifted all votes for the Republican Party. That's a lie. He said that he gained more black men and more Latino men. And he also said that he actually got every demographic by more than any other Republican candidate. That's not true either. That's just not true. He then went on to talk about how they have a new political majority. A new political majority. Yeah, he's talking about MAGA. They're not new, but I mean, if you want to talk about a new political majority, you talk about how the Republican Party is no more. And that's due to the simple fact of the matter is it's all about MAGA. So either, you're MAGA or you're not, right? The Republican Party is gone. So he told the truth with that. The next thing that he actually talked about, he said that people don't vote for the other side. That's not true at all. Kamala Harris actually got the third most votes in U.S. history. So Yes, the people do vote for the other side, and Donald Trump is just lying as always. Um, and then he said something that's super interesting. He said something that made me pause, something that stopped me in my tracks. He said, "I raised a lot of money for the next race, and I don't think I can use it myself." And then he looked around and he said, "I'm not sure if I'm allowed to run again. Can or maybe can I run again?" And then he looked at Mike Johnson as if he was looking to Mike Johnson to say, "Hey, will you let me run again?" Guys, I just want to stop for a second and say, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. I mean, I've been talking about it, and I truly mean this. The fact that Donald Trump is unhinged, and too many people have made quote unquote jokes about him getting a third term. I mean, but there's also Republican congressmen who are trying to introduce legislation to make it legal for him to run for a third term. This is absolutely unhinged. So there's that. He then talked about teletown halls, and then he said something weird, which again, they used to hammer Joe Biden on the stuff that he would say, but you just always let Trump off the hook. He talked about teletown halls, which of course is like the virtual town halls where, he's here and then everybody can actually kind of check in. And he said that people complain that virtual town hall only work for three people: him, Elvis, and the Beatles. Stop for a second and think about that one. Him, Elvis, and the Beatles. Elvis and the Beatles were dead long before anything close to a virtual or a teletown hall. This guy's office rocker. Anyway, I'll move on. He talked about, he mentioned TikTok, said how he's biased towards TikTok, and he also said that he wants to save all the voices and the jobs on TikTok. So just for anybody who's saying, oh, if you're a streamer on TikTok, you need to get a job. Trump apparently feels like TikTok is a job. So there's that. He then moved into something what I like to call, this week has been a long year. Yeah, he talked about his first 7 days in office. He called the Biden administration a disaster. He said he was talking about how he talked bad about Biden while at the inauguration, and he felt bad about it. But then he said that Biden couldn't understand the bad things that he was saying about him. He's made jokes about like how Biden isn't watching because, he would be in bed by now. And then he continued to move on and talking about all the executive orders that he signed. He said that he signed over 300 executive orders. And then we moved into what I like to call, your time is up, my time is now, which he continued to talk about how the golden age has started. And anybody who's watched me knows that I've talked about this before. When he talks about the quote unquote golden age, he is referencing the gilded age, which is not a good time for all Americans. So there's that. He continued to roll in. He talked about how he is going to quote unquote marshal all of his cabinet members to defeat deflation. That's not how it worked, but that's what he thinks. He then talked about how energy will bring everything down, which again, super nonsensical statement. I don't get that point. But then he talked about all the governmental freezes that he was actually going to do. He definitely spoke on the governmental freezes that he was going to do. Now, keep in mind, I'm recording this on January 28, 2025. This speech was on January 27th, 2025. And he did actually implement multiple government freezes as far as funding and aids. He definitely did that. And you know what has happened already? One day later, it's already been blocked by the courts. They've already blocked his executive action. The funny thing about this, though, is it's a temporary block, so it can actually be heard. Now, the catch-22, though, with all of this is, which we'll talk about it later, but it's going to affect a lot of different avenues, including Medicaid, SNAP benefits, including free lunches for kids, and just like it's a bunch of stuff. But it's already been blocked as of right now. But this was something that he was touting in his speech, and at least at the moment, it's been shut down. He then rolled on to actually talk about Doge, right? He mentioned Doge, which I just want to go on record to say, I think the concept of Doge is a great idea. I think the execution of Doge by anyone, I think Doge should have been a bipartisan entity where both sides were looking to actually cut government spending, and it definitely shouldn't have been headed up by Elon Musk, but I digress. He also talked about getting rid of the Green New Deal, which again, I've already debunked that as well. The Green New Deal wasn't in place. No need to talk about that. But then he mentioned the climate clock, right? He said the climate clock only gave us 12 years to live, but it's no longer a thing, and the actual climate clock is gone, and all this other stuff. And he mentioned like it was created by someone who has no idea what they're talking about. Guys, if you don't know what the climate clock is, this is the climate clock. Basically, it's saying that we have 4 years, 174 days, 12 hours, 58 minutes, and 44, 43, 42, 41, 40 seconds. It's the time left to limit global warming. It's also speaking to the lifeline, the world energy renewable. It gives a lot of different things. So if you haven't checked this out, go ahead and give it a look. But it gives a lot of different information. But climate change is real. Donald Trump denies it. But climate change is absolutely real. But yeah, I digress. He talked about how the person that created this didn't know anything and doesn't know anything about climate and blah, 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 whatever. He then moved on to what I like to call, we out this beep. He talked about how he removed the United States from multiple things, from withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords, withdrawing from the electric vehicle mandate, which again wasn't necessarily a thing. He talked about removing the United States from the World Health Organization, and he talked about how much the United States paid the World Health Organization in relation to China. So yeah, and then he also, for some reason, he again, Donald Trump just goes off on these weird tangents, and so he hops out and out. He calls it the quote unquote weave. I just call it, old age. But he said, he called out Tom Homan, and then he said Tom Homan is getting the bad ones out, which again, that was a prelude to everything that he was going to talk about later. But I digress. He then got to what I like to call failed businessman on business, where he talked about different businesses. He talked about the fact that, of course, can't have Donald Trump if you're not going to talk about drilling. He mentioned drilling. He mentioned that he's going to be approving rapid permits, superseding like normal practices. That's one thing that really bothers me about Trump. He is always willing to supersede normal practices, which is a danger. Anyway, he said he's going to have rapid permits. He talked about deregulation, which, of course, he wants to deregulate more, which he deregulated his last term, which was really negatively impacting the United States, but he did it anyway. He also talked about how that he said that he met with the biggest businessmen in the United States. This is a funny statement, right? He said he said he met with the biggest businessmen in the United States, and he asked, did they want tax cuts or deregulation? And he said that every single one of them told him, none of them said they wanted tax cuts. All of them said they wanted deregulation, which, one, no shit, Sherlock. I'm sure they wanted deregulation. But two, he then continued to say, we're still going to do massive tax cuts. So, simple fact of the matter is, they're getting deregulation and they're getting tax cuts. Yes, they're going to be able to pollute the waters and the land and the air, and they're still going to be able to actually get a lower corporate tax rate. He's going to give it to them all. Donald Trump is giving all of it to them. Every single thing. Guys, just a quick note. If you are watching on the YouTube side, first and foremost, what up? But make sure that you're liking that screen, like the screen. And also, if you're not following me for some reason on any of the socials, whether it be Blue Sky, Twitch, YouTube, or Instagram, give me a follow. All of my social medias are listed on the screen below. And last but not least, if you're watching on the Twitch side, just a reminder, I now have subs. I'm loading really new, cool emotes in. I'm going to do some other things for the subs as well. But if you are interested, please go ahead and grab a sub. And you can also send bits. You can do bits. We have bits now. So if you're interested in sending bits, you can send bits. I think you can send other people subs. We're really getting into it on the TikTok side. So, please consider doing it. All right. So the next thing that Donald Trump did was talk about how he's going to be investigating abuse of power. Of course, Donald Trump is forever the victim and screaming that everyone was out to get him and how he's going to actually make sure that he investigates that. Well, this is what he was actually talking about. Donald Trump, and this is a BBC article talking about how the Trump administration fired multiple lawyers that investigated him. And not only is he fired multiple lawyers that investigate him, he fired multiple independent watchdogs. He fired different inspector generals. Like, he is cleaning out the norms of the government. Donald Trump is doing every single thing to make sure that there's no accountability, and he's going to retaliate as much as possible. So yeah, if you're interested, read this BBC article. It breaks down what he is actually doing as far as his retaliation. But even though he said that he's going to be investigating abuse of power, what he really meant is that he plans on abusing his power more. Anyway, he went on to talk about how that he stopped government censorship and he brought back free speech. Okay. He then talked about how we know that Donald Trump has the certain people that he likes to talk about, Hannibal Lecter and Arnold Palmer. This time he talked about Al Capone or Scarface. He talked about how he had this massive scar on his face and nobody would ever say anything, blah, blah, blah. But he was just saying that he was treated worse than Scarface, whatever. He then, though, talked about something interesting. He talked about how they ended DEI. And then he said, we got rid of a 60-year hatred. He said we got rid of 60 years of hatred with one signing. What was he talking about? 60 years of hatred with one signing. Yeah, so what he was actually talking about with that was... Yeah. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This speaks to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and how this enforces and protects against discrimination when it comes to employment. So you can't be discriminated when it comes to your race, your sex, your physical features, all of those things. Yes, Donald Trump actually signed an executive order to make it legal for people to discriminate against you. This is what he's talking about. He said this was 60 years of hatred that he got rid of. Then he actually did something today that was even more interesting. He actually fired two Democrats that were on the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and which the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they actually enforce those federal laws in the workplace. Again, Donald Trump is doing any and everything possible to make the United States pro-corporation and to hurt the workforce. He's eliminating the possibility to be able to file complaints, to be able to sue, to be able to actually have fair treatment in the workforce. And I'm telling you, it's going to be worse. I mean, he put these billionaires in his cabinet for a reason. Like, it's always been the most insane thing to me that for some reason people thought that he was like, quote unquote, the man of the people. Like he quite literally doesn't care about the people. He cares about the billionaires. Anyway, he talked about how there's only two genders, and he did that or whatever. He talked about the Gulf of Mexico, and yes, I'm gonna call it the Gulf of Mexico. Your mama named you the Gulf of Mexico. I'm gonna call you the Gulf of Mexico. You will never hear me call it that other name. I don't care how much Google Map glazes him. I don't care. It's the Gulf of Mexico. He then went on to talk about how Teddy Roosevelt, because he went back to tariffs, and he went on to talk about how Teddy Roosevelt actually spent all the money from tariffs. Yeah, I know people listen. If you've listened to the Trump supporters enough, they talk about tariffs and they talk about how the United States was once actually basically ran by tariffs and how tariffs was, the way that we did things, blah, 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 blah. All right. And he said Teddy Roosevelt spent all the money from tariffs. I had to look that up for myself. All right, so this is from the Centennial History of the United States and International Trade Commission, and this is the PDF breaking down the history of Theodore Roosevelt, and specifically this section here on page 5, pretty early in it, breaks down the how tariffs came about ending, why they came about ending, and how income tax became in place. And quite literally, first and foremost, this was an actual act of Congress. It was a congressional act where tariffs were actually ended. But the more so, and if you read through this, you can actually use this for reference, but if you read more through it, basically what happened is that the United States being funded by tariffs wasn't actually beneficial anymore. It wasn't beneficial anymore just because other countries around the world, they didn't have the money to actually buy certain products, and like it wasn't bringing in the actual money needed to keep up with the United States population and the growth. And the workforce was starting to expand, and the United States realized there was a free market that was growing, and there was an avenue to actually take advantage of the free market. So by shifting away from tariffs and actually putting the burden into income tax, it allowed the United States to actually grow and keep up with the size of the growth while stimulating the global economy and putting the United States ahead of everybody. Basically, we rode the coattails of Great Britain to actually supersede their economy. So no, Teddy Roosevelt didn't, pass anything to actually get rid of tariffs. It was a congressional act, but even more so, it wasn't beneficial because the simple fact of the matter is the tariffs couldn't keep up with the demand of the American public. It was bad then, it's bad now. Don't let these Trump supporters gaslight you into thinking that tariffs is going to be a good thing. It absolutely is not. Absolutely is not. He then went on to talk about the Panama Canal. We've already talked about the Panama Canal enough. I'm not going to go back into that. But then we moved on to a topic that I like to call south of the border, in which we know this is one of Donald Trump's favorite things to talk about. He rambled on for a long time about this when he talked about how there's no one in, he said there's no one in Tijuana, not one person. He said literally there's no one in Tijuana. He said Tom Homan was there, and Tom Homan actually video called him, and they were in Tijuana, and there were no people in Tijuana. Get the fuck out of here. I'm not even going to fact check that. I'm not going to waste my time on fact checking something that's stupid. And forget it not being true. It's just stupid. Whatever. He then talked about how he ended catch and release, how they were deporting all new people. He said no one's coming across the border. And then he said that there was an open border policy under Biden. Again, we fact-checked all these things. There was no open border policy, whatever. He talked about how he was flying immigrants back in the military planes, which, again, is not standard practices. Donald Trump likes to actually do things that aren't the right ways about going to get them done, which caused a whole bunch of issues, but whatever. And then he talked about the fact that America is respected again. He said America is respected again and no one is laughing at us. And I don't even have a fact check for this. I just have a video. I just want you guys to tell me, does this look, feel, or sound like respect?
Dear President Trump, listen very carefully. Greenland have been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump.
If the translation was correct, the term you used is not allowed in this house, and there will be consequences to the message you have used. It is not okay in this house of democracy. Thank you. Regardless of what we think of Mr. Trump, it is not possible to use such language.
That doesn't sound like respect to me. And regardless of what you think of Mr. Trump, yeah, that's not respect, buddy. That is not respect. The whole world is laughing at us, but whatever. I digress. He then talked about tariffs some more, how he wants to actually tariff. He then talked about the ICE raids that were happening. He said something super interesting, and I think I'm going to do a breakdown on this later, but he talked about how, he talked about violent criminals. And when he said violent criminals, he wasn't talking about violent criminals that were coming into our borders. He specifically said that they're violent offenders that didn't come into the country. They're here and they're repeat offenders, and we want them out of our country. He said he's seeking approval to deport American citizens to other countries. So he's saying that if you're a quote unquote violent offender, you've been to jail multiple times, and you're an American citizen, born, raised in America, United States of America, your family was born, raised in the United States of America, you got generations on generations going back, but he quote unquote deems you as a quote unquote violent offender. They want to actually deport those people. How are we okay with this? You know what's funny when he talked about mass deportation, because he used mass deportation and he covered up saying, oh, we're going to deport all the bad ones. We're going to deport all the people that are doing all the bad things. And now it's actually proven with all of these ICE roundups that no, it's not that they're just targeting criminals or anything. They're targeting everybody. They're targeting everybody. And with that being said, if they get an opportunity to deport prisoners, they're going to deport them all. They're not going to stop at quote unquote violent criminals. They're going to deport as many people as they possibly can, because this is what they want to do to the country. They also talked about how they're going to bring back the death penalty. He talked about how they want to actually kill more people. So, MAGA, the people that claim, oh, we want cheaper eggs, we want cheaper gas prices, Kamala Harris couldn't put a sentence together, things were higher, like all of the BS. I hope you understand what you voted for and what they are going to do. I'll just say this, don't get locked up for any reason. Because you might go to sleep in Texas and wake up in El Salvador. Next, he moved on and talked about China, right? He talked about how China has the a death penalty for, he lied. He said they have a death penalty for like a 1 day for a quick trial. That's not true, but he went on to talk about how China gives people the death penalty for bringing fentanyl in the country, and which China does have a really strict policy with the death penalty when it comes to drugs within their country. He also said that he had a handshake deal with Xi Jinping, where if anyone was exporting drugs from China into the United States, that Xi Jinping would actually, kill them. But he said that since Joe Biden won, well, then he mentioned that the 2020 election was rigged. But he said since Joe Biden didn't have the stomach to actually hold up that deal or whatever, it was weird. He then went on to talk about the cartel. He talked about how he wants to end birthright citizenship and how only the court, he hopes the court can actually see that. And then he actually gave, he mentioned the 14th Amendment and how it was only meant for slaves. And I'm telling you, I feel like there's something up with that. He's targeting the 14th Amendment specifically for a reason. But again, it's all around deportation. It's about population control. They don't want to let people in. They want to get people out. They want to actually deport American citizens. Who do you think they're going to try to come after if they can get rid of the 14th Amendment? Yeah. He then talked about the border wall, and then he said that he called Kamala Harris the border czar, which again, I guess I need to double, triple, quadruple down and say that the United States of America does not have czars. Well, at least we didn't. Now that Jimothy is back in office, he might actually officially make a czar. But he said that the border czar didn't do anything. He said he talked more about the wall. And then he started talking about the stupid chart that he was looking at the day that he was, quote unquote, there was an attempt on his life, and he started talking about his ear. It was a whole thing, whatever. He then moved on to talk about how he's forming a new task force that's going to eliminate foreign gangs. The interesting thing that he didn't say about that task force is if the task force was going to be domestic or abroad. Keep an eye out on that one. He then talked about Con Air. So yeah, he went to another movie. Then we got to the point where I like to call I Get Money, where Donald Trump talked about the massive tax cuts that he was going to give. And spoiler alert, the tax cuts aren't for everyday people. The tax cuts are for the ultra wealthy and for the corporations. He said he doesn't care how many bills it takes to get these tax cuts passed. We'll do it in multiple bills. We're going to get those tax cuts. He then said that he wanted to permanently extend the Trump tax cuts. That's what he said. He wants to put those tax cuts in place permanently. For anyone that knows, tax code is revisited every 8 years. Donald Trump said, nope, let's go ahead and put this in and keep it in forever. Not good. For all those people complaining, oh, my taxes are higher under Joe Biden. My taxes, it's because of Donald Trump. And now he wants to extend that. Anyway, he then went on talking about he's going to get rid of tax on tips and tax on overtime. I love to see how he does that because, it's going to be a whole nother thing. And then he talked about North Carolina and California, and he went on to bash FEMA, and he spoke about how he wants to eliminate FEMA and all this other stuff. That was it. He moved on to what I like to call now is I got plans. And he said he has an American plan where he talked about the border and inflation. And he said that, the border was a big topic for him when he was running and it was really beneficial. But he also added that inflation was something he could talk about. And then he talked about the last tax cuts. Again, he rambles back and forth. He talked about the last tax cuts and then he started to lie, right? He mentioned that the tax cuts were decreased from 21% to 15%, which is not the lie. But after him saying that, which was the truth, he was like, yep, we got it down. I got it down from 40%. Again, in 2017, the actual tax rate was 22% and it dropped down to 12.8%. Now, corporation profits grew by 44% after their tax bill dropped by 16%. So I don't know if he got confused as far as thinking that 44 was something that he did or whatever. But yeah, corporations made more money after Trump tax cuts. And guess what they did not do? They didn't trickle. Yeah. So he absolutely lied about that. It was not a record high 40-something% that he actually dropped it down from. He continued to actually talk about how he's going to protect the country with tariffs. He talked about how American products should be favored, meaning that if you're an American product, you should be able to make, buy, and sell American products. He then said that he went to North Carolina and the furniture industry was wiped out by China. I don't know what he was talking about. I'm not even trying to figure it out. And then he said that America was the richest it ever was in 1880s, which again, not true. Like I don't even need to fact check the dumb stuff. He said the auto industry had been wiped out and said that Mexico and Canada destroyed Detroit. He then went on to talk about how there was the massive plant that was supposed to be built in Mexico, and when they realized that he was coming back in office that they actually decided not to build that massive plant. Well, surprise, surprise, he lied. Yeah. So this NPR article talks about how in 2017, which the plan was for Ford to move to Mexico, and in 2017 they did move to Mexico. In 2020 they actually reaffirmed and actually invested more in the EV that they have. Now the caveat to this is instead of Ford completely shutting down their auto construction in Detroit, they left some of the production there. So he's trying to say, oh, they didn't make this massive plan and they didn't leave whatever. Yes, they did leave. They did leave. They did make a massive investment in Mexico for Ford. And then, again, they actually doubled down and invested more. So he lied. Absolutely lied. Which is not a shocker. He then went on to talk about how he talked about how he wants to actually make more chips, and I can only assume that Donald Trump thinks that he was talking about potato chips. Like, he doesn't know what a chip is, but he did say that the Chips and Science Act was giving billions of dollars away. Like, that's not how that works. The Chips and Science Act was a massive piece of legislation that's passed, and I know for a fact that he's going to try to do everything that he can in his power to actually get rid of the Chips and Science Act. So there's that. He then went on to talk about how last time that he was in office, he said that he put a tariff on steel, washing machines, dryers, and they were all good. And if it wasn't for his tariffs, they would not still be produced here in the United States. We know for a fact that Donald Trump put massive tariffs on multiple things, and everything that he put tariffs on in his first term suffered. This is a BBC article talking about how the effects of the Trump tariffs, and not only the effects of the Trump tariffs, but it breaks down here. Where is it? So in a sense, it's straightforward. Tax paid by domestic U.S. firms to the U.S. government, right? And so this actually breaks down what happened with the actual tariffs. It breaks down the increase in prices because of the tariffs. And it even breaks down the impacts on jobs. And this is one of my favorites here. The point as far as what happened with steel, the impact on steel. So washing machines went up, steel went up, job production was hurt. Donald Trump tariff policy was bad. And him implementing another tariff policy will be bad. Straight like that. Anyway, he then moved on and said that we have rare earth that can't be used. He went back to like deregulation and how he wants to actually drill on government land and all this other stuff. But he said that there was rare earth. And then he mentioned Lee Zillen for some reason, whatever. We moved on to what I like to call bloated government, where he mentioned that he would not sign a bill that would cut Medicaid or Social Security for elders. That's specifically what he said. But yet, we know for a fact he made that statement yesterday, and then he immediately signed an executive order impacting those very things. Now, again, we talked about it earlier in the live. They have been put on hold because of the judge, but he specifically went after those things that he said he would not go after. He then talked about how he wants to make deregulations permanent. We've already talked about the climate effect and how bad that is, but he wants to actually do it. He talked about how he wants to remove regulations on AI. He spoke about DeepSeek. If you don't know what DeepSeek is, that's a new AI that's based out of China that was made super cheap, and it it crashed the U.S. market yesterday, which was January the 27th. It crashed the U.S. market, put a bunch of people in panic that China could create an AI that was so much cheaper and so much more efficient. But he talked about that, and then he said, oh, it's a good thing, and we want this to happen, and blah, 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 blah. It was not good. It was not good. But, yeah. He then talked about how we have the most brilliant scientists here in the United States. We all just, again, I'm not going to fact check the dumb stuff. We know for a fact that we don't. The United States of America, we are not leading in the education department. That's why he wants to get rid of the Department of Education, because he doesn't see value in anyone actually being educated. We know for a fact that, science and mathematics in the United States is lacking. So that was a vehement lie. He said he was going to unleash tech companies. I don't know what that's about, but it sounded weird. It sounded like some iRobot stuff. I don't know. The next thing that I have here that he talked about is big stick talk. What is big stick talk? He talked about the defense bill that they're trying to pass. And basically, he talked about his 4 executive orders that he signed. One for the Iron Dome. Already covered that. We don't need an Iron Dome. It's dumb. He talked about how he's removing transgender ideology from the government. Targeting trans people. It's a thing. He talked about how they're removing critical race theory ideology. And then he talked about how they're fully reinstating anyone that left the military because they refused to get the COVID vaccine. Again, we've talked about this as well. It's absolutely insane that he's willing to do that, but he said he's going to reinstate them and give them full back pay. And you know what? After watching him pardon 1,500 January 6ers, I absolutely believe him. Yeah. He then said that recruitment was through the roof over the last couple of weeks. I meant to fact check that one, but I didn't fact check it. I'm willing to say he's a lie, but I didn't look it up. I'll verify it at a later point. And then last but not least, we moved into what I like to call, that's all, folks. That was the conclusion. He started to ramble through a couple of different things, and he really hit some interesting talking points, right? He talked about how there's nothing that the Republican Party can't do if they're not united. This was something that he harped on over and over and over, talking about how important it was for them to stick together. He talked about how the Democratic Party sticks together. He said they might be crazy, but they stick together. We know for a fact that's not true. He talked about how they stuck together to impeach him. He said that they don't have enough people to stick together. He said that there's always a few people that's trying to give them a hard time and they don't stick together. Listen, Donald Trump hammered that point. It was super important for him to actually say, we need to stick together. He talked about how it's a team, and he called people to get them to vote for Mike Johnson. He stated that, they had to come together to actually get Pete Hegseth confirmed, which, fun fact, it was the first time in U.S. history that it took the sitting vice president to break a tie for a cabinet confirmation. That's not good. That's not good. Anyway, he also said that the 119th Congress will be the most successful Congress in U.S. history. I doubt it. And said that they're going to have such a massive success that in January of 2027, their majority will grow even larger. He's saying that they're going to have such a good 2 years that in 2 years, they're going to take more power. He then talked about how he's raising more money for the House and Senate. He talked about his chief of staff. He talked about having the greatest first week for any president ever. Cap. He then talked about how even CNN praised him. But then he said no one watches CNN. Yeah. He then talked about how this is going to be the 4 greatest years in U.S. history. And he landed his plane on saying that they are now the party of common sense. Listen, I don't know if I believe that they're the party of common sense, but I do believe that they are the party of indecency. I do believe that they are the party of divisiveness. I do believe that they are the party of hatred. I do believe that they are the party of big government. Not common sense, though. Anyway, with that being said, guys, that was the 1 hour and 7 minute breakdown of Donald Trump's House Republican Conference speech. It was mind-numbing. Listen, guys, I do it for you. I do it for the people. Quite literally, I would not do it if I didn't have to do it, but I do it for you because I love you. And since I love you, I need you guys to do a couple of things for me. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment in the YouTube chat, just so we can make sure that we get a little bit more push. Make sure you're following me on all the socials, on Blue Sky, on Twitch, on YouTube, and on Instagram. Follow me all across the board. And last but not least, again, if you're on the Twitch side, I need you to drop a comment there as well. But if you are on the Twitch side and you are interested in becoming a sub, we do have subs now. So please, please, please consider subbing. We're going to have more badges coming out soon. It looks like we're going to have to shift more of our subs over from the TikTok to the Twitch, and we're going to have it connected to the Discord. All these things are kind of up in the air. We're working through it, but I promise you we're working on a plan. With that being said, this has been another review of Long-Winded Donnie. I will see you guys later for Late Nights with Santana. I love you all, and as always, peace.